To Creature Guide Live Daily News. Put your or get into the comments and give me your opinions. Let's dive into the first article. So from Sci News, new sauropod dinosaur unveiled. Ling Wulong Shenkai. Fossils of a diplodocoid sauropod dinosaur unearthed more than a decade ago in Ningxia Hui Autonomous Region, northwest China, have been recognized as belonging to a new species. So I'm guessing we're going to be looking at a very distant relative of Diplodocus carnagii from North America. And I'm wondering if this animal is possibly coming in from a bit earlier in time, but it's possible it could be from the late Jurassic around 150 million years ago. And it is awfully strange. This is not usual for any species of sauropod dinosaur to have this short of a neck compared to its body size. Even the core itself seems somewhat short, but a very elongated vertebrae, which is very distinct of different species of diplodocids, especially as you head into the not the late Cretaceous, but the early Cretaceous, considering diplodocids seem to have gone extinct mysteriously around 92 million years ago. But during the late Jurassic, even into the middle Jurassic to an extent, and throughout the early Cretaceous, they were quite successful, like different species of titanosaurs, as well as different types of allosaurs or coccodontosaurs during this time frame. The diplodocids did seem to evolve somewhere around 175 million years ago, along some of the other earlier lineages of the different species of sauropods, and they did derive from the quadrupedal and bipedal prosauropods of the Triassic. So let's see what else is going on here. Ling Wulong Shenkai, which lived approximately 174 million years ago, is the earliest known example of a type of sauropod dinosaur called a neosauropod. Uh, Interesting. So it's being put into also the specifically early neosauropod lineage. So this is also just simply one of the first of the diplodocids in general. That's quite astounding. This it's important to note that it doesn't seem that this is a member of Diplodocidae, which is a family of the Diplodocoideae or diplodocoids. Sauropod dinosaurs originated around 200 million years ago. No, they seem to have evolved around 180 million years ago towards the first 22 million years, or after the first 22 million years of the Jurassic. You still had prosauropods flourishing at this point in at the beginning of this period, considering the Jurassic seems to have started around 201 million years ago. But they only started to dominate terrestrial ecosystems by developing gigantic body size and new adaptations for obtaining and processing plant food. Well, at the moment, we don't know the size of this distinct animal, but I'm guessing it's not very large. And we already had back in the Triassic period over 211 million years ago in South America and specifically Argentina and Brazil, and over in South Africa, prosauropods that could weigh over 9 tons. So that is very far off. Oh, okay. Um, well, speaking of those animals, let's bring up a later relative. And even though this animal is going to be from the early Cretaceous period, I'm bringing it up because it shares similar mutations. So the Amargasaurus, Amargasaurus. This is why you have to be careful with any news article because nutty um, statements like that can occur 200 million years ago in sauropods. That's like saying Gorgonopsians back in the Permian. Okay, I'll come up with something maybe people can be a bit more familiar with. Uh, it's it's almost like saying
Wait, what do you notice in this picture?
I think hold on a second. What, there's a second tail. Like the Amargasaurus is a lizard and well, with an extremely long tail, except it seems to be even thicker or wider in diameter compared to the end of his tail. Supposedly, that's supposed to be the end of it over here. Dinosaurs were not lizards, despite their name meaning terrible lizard in Greek, um, which, by the way, was created by Richard Owen back in the early 1800s. He came up with the name Dinosaurier. Okay, yeah, this is a better reconstruction. Oh, the reason why I was mentioning like these animals not being lizards is because that would also mean that once they lost part of their tail, in many instances it could heal. As long as it still had availability to a lush amount of vegetation. Let's say we're regarding a sauropod in this instance, fresh water nearby. It's also with a herd. So theropods would notice this, and it's going to be a big problem considering now it just lost one of its main defense one of its main defense weapons. So it really has to rely on rearing up on its hind legs. But the question is, could it at this point? Because the tail, in many instances, would be used for balance and it could still use its neck for defense. What was I getting at? Oh, so yeah, they couldn't grow back their tails, but they could heal. We do have evidence from T Rex itself of tails being bitten off by another T Rex and them healing, but likely due to the pack helping feed that specific individual. And it was a full grown adult as well. But yeah, that was quite strange. I think what I was trying to say before is that with the like 200 million year mark, it's like saying Tyrannosaurs first evolved with Dilophosaurus, or over 190. Well, maybe it would be pushing like 180 million years ago, and that was also nearly 10 million years after Dilophosaurus. Let's keep going. So, focusing on Amargasaurus, this is a very distinct member of the Diplodocidae lineage of dinosaurs. It lived over in Argentina over 125 million years ago during the early Cretaceous period and was a medium sized species of sauropod in the region, at least at the time. This was before many large behemoths would roam the country, like for another 30 to 40 million years. Well, okay. If you're being realistic, probably 25 to 30 million years. Like with the different species such as Argentinosaurus, Patagotitan over in Argentina. This is far beforehand. You also at this point do not have the large species of Carcharodontosaurus such as Giganotosaurus and Mapusaurus occurring. You have smaller species of Megaraptorids evolving at this point, and different species of Abelisaurus or relatives of the Carnotaurus, Pachynemosaurus, and Margosaurus, despite its smaller size technically of the sauropod lineage, reaching around 40 feet or pushing 12 meters, and probably weighed in around 7 to 8 tons. It was likely a very robust creature, especially for the Diplodocid lineage. It's not necessarily as lightly built compared to much longer species, and especially as you head further back in time, or even a bit further into the Cretaceous, like to about 115 million years ago, with longer sauropods such as Mamenchosaurus. Mamenchosaurus had a very long lineage in general. Several species have been discovered with that genus dating as far back as possibly as old as the new species of diplodocoid that was discovered between 172 and 174 million years ago. So sauropods massively increased in size very early on. Margosaurus, however, looking at the neck region, which is unlike really any other species of sauropod to date, there are certain other diplodocids that seem to have had an elongated neck vertebrae or cervical vertebrae, but it's very questionable with the Margosaurus as to specifically how and why this occurred. Yeah, it's very possible it would have most likely had this type of a look where there was a massive area of skin and tissue covering those tops of the cervical vertebrae and even towards the upper back vertebrae and the upper caudal or tail vertebrae along the tail. Considering this is the type of representation that we see in different species of theropod dinosaurs, such as the allosaurs like Acrocanthosaurus.
I love Krishima says hi.
Well, get into hello and get into the comments and let me know your opinion about this odd species of sauropod. This animal was not a carnivore, despite its very freaky skull structure. I'd say it's a bit more intense compared to certain earlier species of diplodocids, such as Diplodocus carnegie itself. Diplodocus carnegie is, or the diplodocids in general, they do have that bit of an elongated sort of tooth structure, similar to maybe certain species of titanosaurs, but even then, the titanosaurs tend to be quite different. And same thing for the brachiosaurs, such as Brachiosaurus, Atrox, and Brachiosaurus. Was it? There's another species, but then even Giraffe Titan have very distinct. They also tend to have a little bit of an elongated top head structure.
I love Kurashima said, "This is interesting." Wait, I have a weird one.
Oh no. Well, yeah, he's got problems everywhere. Even hit, I'd say his skull might be the most realistic compared to an actual Margosaurus or some diplodocus. It looks like somebody took a 1920s or 1910s version of a sauropod, maybe even looked at Charles R. Knight's depictions and combined it with a dragon, but also um, gave it, I'd say, very stocky legs compared to its body size. Now, that was a common representation with different species of dinosaurs, especially the sauropods back in early 1900s, late 1800s depictions.
I love Kurashima said that the person is subscribing because you are interesting.
Oh, thank you very much. Um, let's see. Where okay, another thing. There is evidence for a Margosaurus having a double sort of a elongated back vertebrae compared to most other lineages of um, different species of sauropods. However, I could be mixing that up with specifically the upper cervical vertebrae or neck vertebrae itself, and it's just singular. But maybe we need to bring up a skeleton of this species to confirm that. But besides that, it's two dragon-like, stockish, and its tail should not be dragging on the ground. That is also a misconception of the late 1800s and early 1900s depictions of nearly all species of dinosaurs. Even different species like Triceratops, which had much shorter tails compared to its body size. The different movies, like was it 1925, The Lost World, and they still had it dragging on the ground. That might have been a Styracosaurus, however. So, an earlier species of ceratopsian that existed probably around 8 million years, 7 to 8 million years before Triceratops would evolve. It also lived further north. Okay, yeah, I think it was just specific. Well, maybe not. There could be a double situation occurring along the back vertebrae of a Margosaurus. Skeleton also might be in Brazil as well. But besides that, it is interesting how it switches from like a double vertebrae stance to single vertebrae along the caudal vertebrae of the tail. So that's interesting. Or it's something that it's extremely puzzling to a Margosaurus. Why? I mean, maybe there's some benefit when it comes to a defense mechanism against different species of abelisaurs in the area. Maybe it might have helped with attracting mates during the breeding season in certain instances. That's a huge question. In many cases, what is surprising with one of the depictions of a Margosaurus earlier on, especially the one where it looks more of like the skin texture of Acrocanthosaurus, is that it gave it like a very dull sort of a look, which is very possible for different species of sauropods to have had more of like a grayish or maybe um, a medium brown sort of a pigmentation, but there are many instances with a Margosaurus where there's a variety of color that is put onto at least the neck region, especially where there's the um, upper cervical vertebrae, and there might have been just a variety of color to attract mates and scare away other males, possibly even predators themselves. Because a lot of the time, when you look at different species of birds, especially very colorful birds, in certain forested ecosystems, they tend to use their plumage and just coloration to help scare away predators in many instances. Some of the predators, they don't even have to be mammals or reptiles, they can be other species of birds. And sometimes also driving them away from competition, like for seeds, but focusing on a Margosaurus. Yeah, this is definitely a bit more of an exaggerated depiction of the cervical vertebrae. I wonder who's standing behind him. Its tail's on the ground, so it's probably just an older. representation, like either the museum just wanted to keep that old look, which I can't understand, but still a bit odd because you're breaking the tail in many instances. So, yeah, it's not too great or it's horrible.
I love Karmashima says, uh, "What's the reason why the tail is dragging across the ground?"
Well, it used to be theorized, or one of the theories was simply that the tail had to be on the ground for balance. And then there was the other incident where the hips with at least all species of herbivorous dinosaurs were splayed out to the side. And you can say that in certain instances or with certain species of herbivores, because of how large of a rib cage they have in order to utilize all those microbes to digest the plant material, especially all the cellulose, it can have that a slight um, similar depiction, but all of the different species of dinosaurs had their hips directly underneath them. So they were not splayed out to the sides like different species of crocodilians, different species of lizards. And just to reassure everybody, crocodilians are not lizards. They're very distantly related to the lizards and actually more closely related to dinosaurs and birds. It is interesting because the Pseudosuchian lineage, which consists of the crocodilians, many actually parts of the Pseudosuchian lineage had hips that were right underneath their bodies, like the dinosaurs.
Okay, one more question from my love Karashima is, what is with the long spikes on its neck?
Well, that's been the question of all paleontologists for decades, considering this animal was found back in the early 1980s down in Argentina. And it was really unlike any neck that has been discovered with different species of dinosaurs. You could, however, probably compare it with certain species of nodosaurs or certain species of stegosaurs. Now, when it comes to the length of the bones of well, the cervical vertebrae itself, maybe you could compare it with like the horns of different species of ceratopsians, but their horns, it's also not a vertebrae, it's specifically a horn. They're directed onto the frill or the part of the skull that protects the animal's neck, or at least it's supposed to. Um, you just could have it where um, they're not able to dodge a certain predator. But yeah, were these even used for defense? That might be a hard one. It's possible that these were too delicate to be used for defense. So more likely, if there was a wide variety of tissue, then they might have been used to attract mates. But it's still odd considering most of the other diplodocids there were these instances of slightly elongated um, vertebrae that's pretty much equal along the whole body, kind of like with what we see with the new short-necked species. But this is awfully strange. It was an herbivore, so it's just feeding on different species of ferns, some of the earliest species of flowers during this time. Probably occasionally going over to riverbeds and swallowing small stones called gastrolids to help grind the vegetation's stomach. Considering these animals did not have the ability to chew food. Now, the chewing isn't really the problem, and it actually helps these animals in a wide variety of ways, considering they're having to take in, especially with the larger species weighing over 40 tons, they're having to take in well over 3,000 pounds of food each day or pushing over 1,400 kilograms. And you can't get in that many or very much nutrients or minerals if you're having to chew your food. That's a very cost effective sort of a mechanism. And you need energy just to simply do that.
I mean,
Or is it
costly?
yeah, just I think what I was just trying to refer to was it costs a lot of minerals and nutrients just to simply chew the food efficiently to get into the digestive system. And it's okay if you're only having to take in a small amount of food, like with the different species of hadrosaurs, which could reach the size of Margosaurus and sometimes even larger, the duckbill dinosaurs such as Parasaurolophus or Lambeosaurus. But once you surpass that size, it's very challenging to get in the proper amount of nutrients. But where was I getting in with that? Oh, It's possible because they had to swallow these small stones that they did not contain certain stomach acids that would have been able to break down these different types of vegetation, considering it's harder to break down vegetation than it is animal protein. That's why many species of birds today will swallow small stones. It's not necessarily for the animal protein they're having to use it for, it's for the vegetation that they're feeding on. Let's see. Is there anything else? Oh, yeah, I'd say that the teeth might be a little longer compared to its skull size than when looking at Diplodocus itself. Here, it has tissue, but the vertebrae is still very much exposed. It's just basically connected to each other. It was likely that the vertebrae as a whole was completely covered in tissue. You could still see the slight indentions, but this is just a little protruding. I also think that this Amargasaurus might be a little skinny. Sauropods in general had very wide rib cages compared to their body size. This isn't necessarily a surprising trait with different species of herbivores throughout the dinosaur lineage, but like when you're looking at different species of stegosaurs, stegosaurs are very well known for having extremely wide rib cages. Ceratopsians in many instances, like even I'd say with certain earlier species of ceratopsians, the rib cage might be a bit shorter in overall diameter than certain other species. Triceratops, it's massive. If you're looking at certain species like Chasmosaurus or Pentaceratops, it's a little shorter, but they're also much smaller compared to Triceratops. Yeah, that was actually a good depiction of a Margosaurus skeleton. I was just staying on the ceratopsians for a little bit.
If I can find it.
I think the feet on this Amargasaurus are fine, except, well, you're not really seeing the thumb claw on the forefeet. It seems to be just giving them those distinct toe impressions, kind of like an elephant, but smaller, like the back feet. It would be completely different. And even the back feet are far too short. You would have had quite long claws protruding off of the back feet of these diplodocids.
That it?
Well, be a bit shorter than like certain titanosaurs. Yeah, that's it. If you look at the animal, it really is a more robust or a more heavily built type of diplodocid or version of Diplodocus. Despite Diplodocus reaching over 90 feet in length, they're pushing 32 meters.
Okay. I love Kermanshama says, what is the one predator that walks on land and water, whatever the name is, it looks just like that?
Well, you said walks on water, right? Um, well, I'm okay. I'm guessing you're talking about a species of theropod dinosaur that hunts in the water. We don't have any species or even the flying pterosaurs, the close relatives of the dinosaurs that would have the
Said looks just like this.
Margosaurus is really its own thing. You could say that there are certain species of dinosaurs that might carry certain traits that might look slightly similar in mutations. Parasaurolophus, for instance, has been reconstructed like the long crested duck-billed dinosaur. In some cases, with an immense area of tissue connecting the neck to
No,
the.
said predator.
Oh, right. Okay, let me stay on track. I'm guessing you might be referring to either Spinosaurus. Well, there's a number. It could be Spinosaurus over in northern Africa, lived far after Margosaurus. There's also Sigilmosaurus, Suchomimus over in northern Africa before Spinosaurus had a very even distribution of its back vertebrae, or at least the elongated vertebrae. When looking at really the back, possibly also part of the upper caudal vertebrae or the part of the tail that would connect it to the pelvis.
Hold on.
I mean, Spinosaurus, I mean, much of its vertebrae, if you're looking at the caudal vertebrae and the back vertebrae, is the elongated, but obviously much more towards the back.
Are you referencing this?
But there are certain spinosaurs also that didn't really have any elongated back vertebrae or vertebrae in general at all. Um, yeah, I'm trying to. Well, there's also Acrocanthosaurus, which might be, if you're looking at the neck, slightly similar. Yeah, a Spinosaurus, it is odd. Like towards the neck, it doesn't really have much of an elongated vertebrae compared to certain Carcharodontosaurs.
It said that's what they were looking for.
Spinosaurus?
Mhm.
Okay. It is different. Like when you're looking at this animal, there's been a wide variety of theories as to what the sail would have been used for. It likely, like what we're suggesting for a Margosaurus, the sail would have been used for attracting mates, intimidating rival males during the breeding season. It might have also have been used for providing shade, like the animal, or the Spinosaurus would walk out into like a bit of a calm part of a lake or some wider river, and simply would have stayed still with its snout inside the water and waiting for a fish to come by, and it would just acted like a tree and then occasionally snatch at the fish.
That's a funny way to state it.
Well, it also has all these holes along its snout, very similar to today's crocodiles, that would have captured the movements or at least the vibrations coming in from the waves of the swimming fish. And it's not just feeding on small, 2 or 3 foot long fish for around a meter. It's going after certain species of fish that can reach well over 12 to 18 feet in length, sometimes even longer. Or pushing between 3.4 to over 5 meters.
You were talking about, was it yesterday or the day before, about Spinosaurus and its ability to swim, and I actually missed part of that. Where you were saying, was it able to swim like a certain animal or not?
I think I was comparing it to crocodiles, crocodilians in general, and it's still bit of a debate. It's a constant back and forth, but I think it's um, there's been more analysis done on the overall locomotion of this animal when it comes to swimming. It doesn't seem to have had the efficiency to at least swim similar to a crocodilian. But it when looking at dinosaurs as a whole, seems like pretty much all of them had the ability to, efficiently, like, have a basic sort of swimming motion. Even dinosaurs like the tyrannosaurs, which had very small arms compared to their body size.
Okay, I'm just bringing this up because it was something that you always got annoyed by.
This
The
po
the fight in Jurassic Park 3.
um Oh, you're just bringing it up.
Yeah.
I thought you were gonna pull up a
How
picture.
realistic was that?
Well, first of all, when you're looking at the Spinosaurus in that movie, it's there's an incredible amount of muscle added to the creature. And it also has a very unrealistic sort of stature. The tail is far too stiff. The spine or the back vertebrae looks like this skeleton. And this was actually a representation of, or it was portrayed as a realistic of portrayal of the Spinosaurus for, I think, a little over a decade and a half, possibly. But it had, like, certain traits of Suchomimus. Like, if you even look at the logo of Jurassic Park 3 and you see what's supposed to be a Spinosaurus skeleton, that's actually, I believe, the, skull of Suchomimus. In fact, it might even be the forearms.
I was
It just
referencing the
shows.
fight.
Huh?
I was referencing the fight, though.
Yeah, but I was just going over, like, even the different, things that they exaggerated on the animal. And why, like, that's good to take into account because that's happened with a wide variety of different species of dinosaurs in almost every movie, is that there have been massive exaggerations to it. It's kind of like with the last movie, Primitive War, and you had it where a Spinosaurus came out of the water and just killed a Triceratops. That would not have occurred, or at least with a full-grown Triceratops individual. It would easily, well, compared to maybe a T-Rex, which is meant for attacking Triceratops, Spinosaurus is really just evolved for feeding on different species of fish. It might prey on a smaller long-necked sauropod, which is not heavily armored. It doesn't really have to be concerned about truly powerful, at least for the most part, um, or at least heavily built species of theropods, because it's usually dealing with creatures that have more of a just sharper sort of dental structure when it comes to attacking and not bone crushing to the extent of tyrannosaurs. But I'll stay on topic. Um, it's not meant for attacking armored dinosaurs. In reality, Triceratops would have just pushed it over and gored it. Also, Triceratops was massively undersized. Triceratops was larger than Spinosaurus, and when it comes to at least the weight, Spinosaurus was longer than Triceratops, in some cases by over 20 feet, or pushing an extra 6 meters. So Triceratops like 9 meters or 30 feet in length. Spinosaurus can reach about 50 feet or 15 meters and maybe weigh 8.5 to 9 tons, even on the upper end.
Which specific, Spinosaurus are you talking about?
Is Spinosaurus aegypticus. There was a new species in like the past couple of months that was discovered over in Niger. Spinosaurus aegypticus has been found over in Egypt, Morocco, Niger as well. Possibly certain fragments from Algeria, but what was the other thing? Oh, so yeah, even when you look at the neck of Spinosaurus, but I'd even say if the Spinosaurus was built in that manner, you look at the arms too. And fighting a T-Rex that size, I still think the moment the T-Rex got a hold of the Spinosaurus's neck, it's not going to let go, and the Spinosaurus is not going to be able to shake it off. It never made sense when they had the T-Rex just let go. It would take an incredible amount of force. Like, I could possibly see a Triceratops being able to knock the T-Rex off, but it's because its frill is probably going to hit the T-Rex's skull, which is going to induce a massive amount of pain, and it could likely even fracture the T-Rex's skull in some instances because it has probably the most heavily built frill compared to any species of horned dinosaur.
What about it breaking the T-Rex's neck?
Well, yeah, that's another problem is that the Spinosaurus would not be able, first of all, to hold on to the T-Rex the way that it did. It turned its hands in a way that dinosaurs or theropod dinosaurs in general are not meant to, in a lot of cases, hold on to their prey. So usually it's that you have it where the arms or the hands are facing each other. They're not able to become pronated like at least people's hands, or many species of mammalian carnivores in general, which are usually faced like the opposite way of a dinosaur's. Now, you could say when we're usually walking, technically our hands are more positioned a bit more closely or like theropod dinosaurs, but they can't necessarily turn them in that instance. What's another thing? Yeah, it's really the bite force of the T-Rex. It's also that T-Rex is truly meant for fighting. Spinosaurus, it's not that it isn't capable of it, but it's really not meant for attacking dinosaurs that are also meant to go after like different species of armored dinosaurs like the ankylosaurs. It's just much weaker. And it's not even one of those instances where it's a much more lightly built species of animal, but it's still very capable of going after um, much larger species or even more heavily built species. It's really just meant for having a bit of I would say a relaxed lifestyle, but not too violent.
I love Kuroshima says, "How's your day, and do you enjoy doing this?"
Um, yeah, I mean, saw something about what's going on with certain rhinos over, not rhinos, I think elephants over in, was it Mozambique and Kenya? Um, like with certain herds moving in certain migratory directions. That was interesting. But yeah, I mean, I've been doing this since I was 2, 3 years old, and it's been pretty fun. I mean, the thing is that it's expanded a lot more as like I became older, and you had it where like I was really focusing on different species of dinosaurs, and finally expanding it to the from the Mesozoic to the Proterozoic era before the dinosaurs, then to the Cenozoic era, or the time after dinosaurs, also known as the age of mammals. despite mammals having a lot of competition with other um, leftover archosaurs that never left, like different species of birds and crocodilomorphs. And despite also, at the same time, somewhat focusing on different species of modern day animals, I didn't go too into depth with them. And then finally, I wanted to see what's going on all over the world. And then I figured out that, like, for instance, there isn't just the Serengeti National Park, the Yellowstone National Park, or the Masai Mara, which were really the only national parks I was familiar with. There might have been like the Everglades. Who else? Mount Kilimanjaro, but that was pretty much it. Like when I finally realized that over in much of the United States or North America and even Africa and Australia had a wide variety of protected areas, different a wide variety of different types of ecosystems and ecoregions, is when I found out like, whoa, okay, I want to really dive deep into this
That was
because
over 10 years ago.
yeah, it was a while back. I found it really I always found it quite shocking how people were able to like stick to a specific animal in a specific ecosystem in some part of the world. I'm like, I mean, even though they would sometimes compare it with like very um limited, I guess yeah, a limited knowledge of certain other species, especially closely related to the creature in different parts of the world. But I'm like, how can you stick specifically on certain mule deer herds over in what Grand Staircase National Monument, Utah, or maybe like the Uintah Wasatch National Forest of the state. Um, actually, I'll make it maybe a bit more familiar. Maybe certain elk herds over in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem, or like Grand Teton National Park or Yellowstone, and not like decide to like very shortly afterwards, like in some later part of the day or even that hour, you want to also focus on like certain like bison populations in different parts of Montana, Alberta, or even Alaska, or even like certain populations of European bison over in Europe. And then, like, why not even head back and like back in time to the Pleistocene or the Ice Age and take a look at different species that were closely related, like bison latrifons, bison atruscati, who else? Like different species of deer, such as Cynoma giceris. And I know I'm putting on a lot of names out there, but and then even like possibly take all these animals and try to compare it as to how, for instance, these species of long necked sauropods would have existed. And especially like when you're looking at what certain or what a lot of time you would have to pick for many people have to pick when going to different universities or colleges or having to do a certain research project. I just find it really hard or just completely unable to work in that sort of a way. But also, I think it's like just having specific basic interests in these fields. And that's also, I think, why when it comes to the different discoveries or accomplishments of different zoologists, paleontologists, um, I'm trying to think of another major field. Actually, even botanists, it's actually quite astounding as to how many people that were really described as botanists back in the early 1900s or late 1800s, actually even further back in like 1700s. I think sometimes they might have been classified as naturalists though, but they actually knew quite a bit about the different species of animals in the area. So I even thought like, well, wouldn't you, if you're looking at how these plants are not only benefiting the ecosystem, but what specifically benefits them, wouldn't you have to know at least a certain basic amount about the different species of mammals or even reptiles, birds, also utilizing those species?
I love Kirishima said, I hope I can be like you someday.
Yeah, I mean, it's just simply, um, like I take it as like it doesn't have to be specifically narrowed down to a certain part of the world. I mean, it can just be branched off to a wide variety of different areas. I would say that when it comes to paleontology, think one thing I found interesting is that it was quite shocking as to how many people, like when I would talk, this was years back, when I would talk about different species of dinosaurs and they go into like different types of rocks and minerals, which is important to know, but I found it quite shocking as to like in some cases they were able to focus on like these types of earthly um I'm just trying to think of another word. Huh? I don't think it's necessarily sediments or materials. I mean, sediments is closer. Um, well, basically that field, and I guess just really sticks to it. But I guess there's a wide variety of people when it comes to discovering different things about oil, for instance, and just having a huge interest there. But I think it's that in some cases depending on how you're looking at it, it might not be as large or seem to be as large of a, scale when looking at, like, different, um, like, parts of the earth and their ecosystems, but then again, there are all these chemical formulas that come with, like, looking at, oil many instances, but even the same thing for animals and when you're looking at their biology. That was another interesting thing, is that especially when I was much younger, and I wanted to understand like how the different muscles, sometimes like even the names, but really, I had trouble um, really memorizing the names of like different parts of the body or even different animals in general without also immediately going into depth about the functions of that specific part of the body or the animal in the ecosystem, um, even partially how it evolved, but really focusing on its ecosystem function. Because I'm like, why are we memorizing this, or what's the point of taking it um, as memory if I'm not learning anything about it? That was also the problem that I had with learning geography when, like, you were given a test when I was like 11, 12, or even younger. I literally could not memorize the almost like any specific countries in the world or where they were besides like, the United States, Canada, they're also the two of the largest countries on earth. I think it's what? Russia, or is it I think it's Russia, Canada, us, then China. Um but I think
What's your point?
oh, it wasn't until later where I was looking at where different animal populations and even certain ecosystems were occurring in different countries. And it helped if the animal populations were fragmented because I think, like I was looking at, is okay, the range of, like, let's say the American black bear, for instance, which was true, it occupies this much of the state of Maine. There's this many here, and then it's a bit less over here in adjacent. I think was it New Hampshire, and it's this type of an ecosystem over here, and that's how I was actually able to finally um, keep the names of at least the states of this country in my head. And then basically I use that same sort of a mechanism for different countries, like especially over in Europe, Asia. And I think now I mentioned that fragmented animal populations would help. That is, if we know specifically also, like we already have it mapped out where they are. Sub-Saharan Africa was actually quite tricky. Even sometimes it can be a bit of an issue today because we might have a slight estimate as to how many animals are in a certain area, but we don't know where they are, or it's such a small region. And then you see something a bit later that said, well, there used to be about 200 elephants over in this part of Nigeria. Now they're dead. You're like, oh, great. And it's now you could say, well, there's different primate populations, but it's really also the animals that are, at least to me, more interest. Zebras,
Just to state this,
giraffes.
I love Kirishima said that person's from Georgia and they live in Rome.
Well, I guess we've also heard from other people of continuous.
How far is Georgia from Rome?
That I do not know. Like, I don't even know when it comes to flights.
That's not what I'm asking. Where's Georgia?
Wait a second. Georgia, as in the state, or Georgia as in the country?
I'm assuming the country.
Oh, okay. So that's like adjacent to Armenia, Azerbaijan over in Western Asia. So by the Caucasus, literally along the Caucasus Mountains. Yeah, I was thinking the state of Georgia, but still the approximate length that I do not know. I mean, you're over in central Italy.
I asked.
Okay. Oh, okay. I mean, there. I think why I actually thought you might have been actually asking, like, what's the distance, is because there's many people in the United States, and like, what's the distance from, uh, Dallas to Denver, or I guess a better comparison would be, what's the distance from Yellowstone to Glacier National Park? I think it's like 2 to 3 hours. I mean, it's a bigger. Okay, let's head back to the sauropod. Let's see, where were we? These giant neosauropod descendants were thought to originate around 160 million years ago, rapidly diversifying and spreading across the world during a time window perhaps as short as just 5 million years. We were surprised to find a close relative of Diplodocus in East Asia 174 million years ago, said Professor Paul Upchurch from the Department of Earth Sciences at University College London, UK. It's commonly thought that sauropods did not disperse there until 200 million years ago. He said that, not prosauropods. Now, okay, sauropodomorpha, that would make sense. So, yeah, I should have mentioned that earlier. But the problem is he's just mentioning sauropods itself. Um, in fact, I don't recall anybody using that shorter term for sauropodomorpha in general. So this is just quite odd. Um, Yeah, okay. And many of their giant descendants reached this region much later, if at all. I forgot. Where were we? China? China. Okay. So our discovery of Lingwulong Shenkai demonstrates that several different types of advanced sauropod must have existed at least 15 million years earlier. Oh, no, no, no. That is, oh, wait, we're talking about Middle Jurassic. Okay. I think. And spread across the world while the supercontinent Pangea was still a coherent landmass. This forces a complete revaluation of the origins and evolution of these animals. Yeah, I mean, it's not surprising that we had different species of diplodocoids over in Asia. At this point, much of the Earth was connected. Now, it definitely is less connected at this point than towards the early Jurassic, like 190 million years ago. That's why you had different species of prosauropods and neotheropods over in Antarctica, also connected to South Africa. So, for the study, Professor Upchurch and colleagues analyzed the fossilized skeletons of 7 to 10 individual dinosaurs that were found together in rocks in 2005. Well, yes, this is slightly more recent than many instances where, well, back in the late 1800s, like the 1870s or 1880s, they found this fossil and then it was just stuck into
Why do
an
I
institute.
recognize the name Upchurch?
Yeah, I do too. It's not hitting me who this is though. Okay. Let's bring up another sauropod. Or no, 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 neotheropod. Keep going. Gasosaurus. Gasosaurus. Did we just jump from Spinosaurus and T Rex to the other thing? That's not surprising. Wow, this is a very unexpected sort of a look for him for Gasosaurus. I mean, this is a species of, I believe, Tenotarian species of theropod dinosaur from the Middle Jurassic, but it could be a megalosaur as well. But Tenotarian is a very broad sort of a term. This is a medium-sized species of megalosaur, even for Megalosauroideae at this point in the Jurassic. This is around 168 million years ago, over in the northern hemisphere. And this animal, I believe, was over in Eurasia. was probably not much more than 13 to 14 feet in length. They're pushing a little over 4 meters.
Okay, I'm breaking it again. So I love Kirishima said, so my brother said that their T-Rex is the king. Is that true?
Yes, he is the leader. He has been the leader since around 19. Well, okay, if you're talking about when he was first discovered, like back in, I believe, the late 1870s, but he had not been described. He wouldn't be described for another 25 to 30 years. Over in, I believe, a part of Colorado. And it was Henry Fairfield Osborne that ended up naming him back in, I think, 1904 or 1905. And I believe the creature at the time was pushing around 40 feet or 12 meters, or at least that was the largest specimen that we had discovered. It was interesting because with earlier estimates of T Rex, though they might have been slightly larger in the late 1800s or early 1900s, and they became slightly slimmer, and then they massively increased again. But we're pushing somewhere around 5 to 7 tons. At this point, even 7 tons is quite a small T Rex. However, you did have Triceratops, which was found but described much earlier in time by Edward Drinker Cope and Othniel Charles Marsh. It's not hitting me who specifically discovered the animal, but that is the most dangerous land animal to exist. But the title does go to the theropod.
Wait a minute. The most dangerous land animal is actually a Triceratops, but
Well, it's just when it comes to overall intelligence, likely the way that the animal was for family oriented and took care of its young was superior compared to Triceratops, which it's really hard to tell how these different species of herbivores would have taken care of their young. You could say the same thing for theropods, but theropods, in a lot of instances, seem to have very much looked after each other, even in instances where they had extreme injuries, like with the T Rex named Y Rex, that had most of its tail bitten off, was still cared for by its own kind or by its own family. The herbivores, and when you look at many lineages or families of herbivores today, it can be a little less so in like certain herds of elephants, but it always depends. They tend to not really care as much for an injured individual. It makes the herd more vulnerable to predators. They can also lag behind in many instances when having to make large migrations, but it also can be if the animal has a massive broken leg. So many instances, they will further injure that individual or um, if there's like a certain pack of predators nearby, or it could be the same thing with like theropod dinosaurs, and then they'll literally shove it towards the predators so they don't have to deal with it anymore. Or it doesn't prey on more of the herd. You could say that it's not necessarily a dumb survival strategy, but I guess if you're looking at it by theropod morals, yeah, herbivores are kind of evil in many instances.
kind of like the Kawaka.
You do have, yeah, certain species of marsupials that, this happens with a wide variety of different species of macropods or members of the kangaroo family, where if it comes to a point where they're in very close pursuit of, well, they're being pursued by a dingo or maybe even a species of quoll, they will release their joey or their baby quokka or younger kangaroo, so they don't have to be caught by the predator themselves. Um, yeah, not the best parents. Okay, focusing on the Gasosaurus. Wait, what was the original question? Oh, T Rex. These were more of like the medium-sized tyrannosaurs of their day, but they're very distantly related. Megalosaurs and tyrannosaurs are very far off in the family tree from each other. They're all part of Theropoda, but the tyrannosaurs would evolve from the Saurosaurs. The megalosaurs were already evolving like over 180 million years ago in the Jurassic. Gasosaurus is much smaller compared to larger, later contenders such as Megalosaurus, Torvosaurus, and even the Spinosaurs, which are all members of the Megalosaur group. Now, what was interesting is that in that model, it showed the animal covered in feathers. There's no evidence so far for that.
Okay, I'm gonna break back in. I love Kirishima says, okay, because I thought the Brachiosaurus was the king because of how long his neck is and how big it is.
Well, I think due to certain documentaries, certain movies, even books, possibly like even certain theories about the animal very early on, especially by like Elmer Riggs, who is the animal, or not the animal, who is the paleontologist that described Brachiosaurus, Atrox. Like the Brachiosaurus was found back in the late 1800s, I believe, or well, at least the early 1900s is when he was described in Colorado. But um, yeah, I think Brachiosaurus has many times been portrayed as a very powerful species of sauropod, which it was, and also more heavily built compared to a wide variety of species. We're looking at a sauropod that could reach over 85 feet or pushing well over 30 meters and probably weighed in some cases of 50 tons. However, Brachiosaurus in a lot of instances can be portrayed with having a very tall skull structure. That's Giraffatitan, which in a lot of cases are what models of Brachiosaurus tends to be portrayed on, because we don't have much of the skull of Brachiosaurus specifically, at least that area. Though I believe we have fragments. It would have been much shorter, and so you could say the Giraffatitan was slightly larger. I mean by maybe 1 or 2 tons. Well, it was not very much. Giraffe Titan was also over in Tanzania, so East Africa, at around the same time, about 152 million years ago. But yeah, Brachiosaurus, I would say, would still be one of the most powerful species of dinosaur to inhabit the Jurassic period. Um, but I think it's just when it comes to overall um, intelligence.
I think it was just the reference of as a whole throughout all dinosaurs.
Yeah, I think Brachiosaurus, also just for how renowned it is. It is the most renowned species of sauropod dinosaur. Well, okay, Brontosaurus might, slowly run into the conversation and say, "Whoa, whoa, my a joke?" Which I still would probably put Brachiosaurus on. Yeah, I would put
But who's
Brachiosaurus on
above
top.
them?
Talking about size.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you had a wide variety of species. It obviously would limit as you increased in size, but you had Argentinosaurus and Patagotitan, which weighed between 72 to 85 tons. Brachiosaurus was probably on average. I'm not sure if he was slightly taller. It's just that not much of the length of Brachiosaurus was close to the ground, whereas Argentinosaurus and Patagotitan much longer amount of their length was, and considering they could reach over 120 feet. We're pushing somewhere around 40 meters.
What was
That's-
the actual weight difference between?
Well, I mean, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, you are that can be in some instances a 35-ton weight difference. So yeah, an Argentinosaurus could smush a Brachiosaurus. Same thing for a Patagotitan, even though that's probably less by like around 25 tons, still an immense amount. Animals like Mamenchosaurus were closer in weight. I'm not even sure if Mamenchosaurus probably weighed as much as Brachiosaurus because it's a diplodocid. Diplodocids, especially the longer species in many cases, were not as heavily built compared to Brachiosaurs. Um, Brachiosaurs put a lot more emphasis into their bone density. So you could possibly call, in some cases, Brachiosaurus the king of the sauropods, but it's hard to um, put that out there when you're comparing it with certain South American species like Patagotitan. I would say Brachiosaurus might be the king of North American sauropods. Um, let's see. Okay, so with Gasosaurus, well, that's interesting. They have its arms splayed in an awfully odd way. Yeah, it should really be facing each other, not be in this sort of an instance. It's got a odd sort of a trail, and it's missing a claw and a full on two phalanges. What's going on here? unless it's supposed to be based off a specimen where it's just missing that part of the finger, but I highly doubt that, considering we have found parts of Gasosaurus, but not the complete specimen. So yeah, they forgot to add the finger. That's that's kind of disrespectful. This animal. Wait, no, maybe there's a reason. He's got a lot of chipped teeth. Maybe he just doesn't deserve to have his extra finger put on there as well.
Okay, and this one just so you can tear it apart.
What? There were certain species of ornithopods that had appeared at this point, but not in this sort of a form. This is like
It
the
says it's a gaseous horse.
well, okay, yeah, that's very far off. And I'm not sure what species of theropod, like smaller, like an earlier relative. It seems maybe the ornithomimids. It's definitely like not some sort of a Compsognathus or Procompsognathus was back in the very beginning of the Jurassic over 201 million years ago. But yeah, this is not even it's not even a saurischian, it's an ornithischian ornithopod that looks like a creature from the early Cretaceous, like pushing between 135 and 140 million years ago at least. Back in the Jurassic with different species of ornithopods, and no, it's not a Gasosaurus. Um, yeah, it's not a Gasosaurus.
I
It's
love said, "How tall can the Brachiosaurus be?"
it could get you around 40 to 45 feet.
No, tall.
Yeah, 40 to 45 feet in height, or
Oh,
pushing 12 to 14 meters. So, still one of the tallest dinosaurs to exist, and probably decently intelligent, especially for the Jurassic. But I'd say sauropods as a whole, their brains didn't differ too much. So back to the earlier Chinese creature. I think it's around 174 million years ago. We organized 4 excavations at a new dinosaur site in the lower middle Jurassic Yan'an Formation at Tanyaopu Lingwu Ningxia Hui. Oh gosh, Autonomous Region, which resulted in the discovery of fossil material comprising 7 to 10 partial skeletons. Okay, now it sounds exciting, including portions of 2 skulls ranging from juveniles to adults. Yeah, that's really good to hear from sauropods in general. I mean, dinosaurs too. Whoa, well, that's interesting. So we actually found a major part of the skull on this individual. Few of the cervical vertebrae, or at least along the neck, certain ribs and upper, like one of the upper back vertebrae. Oh yeah, certain cervical, not cervical, caudal vertebrae, or at least along the tail. I think most of the toes, but maybe missing the um large thumb claws, even towards the hind feet.
okay. She asked, "How long have dinosaurs been extinct?"
Well, for the non-avian dinosaurs, so not including the birds, well, there were actually many species of birds that went extinct during the Cretaceous period. It's been about 66 million years. What is interesting is that there used to be, or technically there still are, many theories as to dinosaurs towards like the last 20 to 25 million years of the Cretaceous period or their reign. They were decreasing in variety. um, you could say in some instances that might appear to be true, but then there are other ecosystem or fossil basin situations where there's still a wide variety of dinosaurs being or evolving towards the end of the Cretaceous. Even the last half half a million to a million years, you're still seeing a wide variety of dinosaurs evolving. And then there was just obviously from the asteroid a complete halt. Um,
Don't a lot of people still confuse crocodilomorphs with dinosaurs?
They do. Well, it's also pushed, I think, still in some instances with crocodiles being dinosaurs, and they are related, and they're the most closely related lineage of reptile living to the dinosaurs.
Wait a minute. Specify what you're saying, though.
Crocodilians are crocodilomorphs, which are members of the archosauromorph lineage like the dinosaurs, but they are not dinosaurs. Many cases, or at least with certain members of the pseudosuchian lineage of archosaurs, which is what the crocodilians derive from, they had their hips splayed out to the side. There were different terrestrial species of crocodilomorphs, like the Rausuchians, the Cebasids, which lived until about 3.5 million years ago, towards the end of the Pliocene epoch. So, shortly before the Ice Age or the Pleistocene would occur, you had some of the last species of terrestrial crocodilomorphs on land that would have hunted different species of mammals. Also, going after even maybe earlier species of terror birds at the time. We're talking about certain species that probably still weighed upwards of 13 to 1,700 pounds, or somewhere between 600 to maybe 800 kilograms. But where are we going with that? Yeah, it does seem with the dinosaurs in general that they were all warm blooded. The crocodilomorphs, at least, there doesn't seem to be any evidence for these animals likely being um, warm blooded like the different species of not just dinosaurs, but even the pterosaurs themselves, which we've even found pigmofibers or preserved feathers, different specimens. Um, okay, well, let's continue. So,
She asked something else. I'm
uh,
just trying to figure it out. Okay, we just ran back at T-Rex again. I guess just you can answer all of it. Um, one is how many years did it live?
so far, it seems that the oldest T Rex we have found is somewhere around 32 years. There might have been a slightly older individual, usually like it's around with the older adults, like late 20s to early 30s. But it also doesn't seem that they stopped growing when they died either. Like there is evidence for also all species
You
of
mean until
dinosaurs.
they died?
Oh, yeah, until they died. Um, yeah, I don't think. Yeah, that was off. Even with different species of long necked sauropods, the stegosaurs, all of these animals show evidence for continuously to grow throughout their lives, just at slower rates.
How long ago did they die off?
T Rex did die out 66 million years ago when the asteroid hit the Earth. Same thing for Triceratops horridus and Triceratops porsus, the descendant of Triceratops horridus. Um, just trying to think of what else to add to that. I'd say the earliest Tyrannosaur ancestor of T Rex probably being something like Proceratosaurus. Well, problem is Proceratosaurus, its lineage seems to have died off during the early Cretaceous period around 122 million years ago, despite it evolving probably pushing between 161 to 163 million years ago in England.
John Doe's also in the chat. Said, "Hello, everyone."
Hello. Let me also think, or let me know what you think about this odd species of theropod or this short necked sauropod.
I think he just jumped in.
Oh, well, hello again, theropod. Let's see. What else is going on here? Should we continue? Okay. So new evidence also reinforces the growing realization that the early Jurassic, 200 to 175 million years ago, technically it's like 201, but when it started, was a key time in dinosaur evolution, witnessing the origins and diversification of many groups that went on to dominate the later Jurassic and Cretaceous. Diplodocus like neosauropods were thought to have never made it to East Asia because this region was cut off from the rest of the world by Jurassic seaways, so that China evolved its own distinctive and separate dinosaur fauna, said Dr. Xingshu from the Institute of Vertebrate Paleontology and Paleoanthropology, Chinese Academy of Sciences. Um, I wonder. Okay, I think it's talking about neosauropods earlier in the Jurassic because there's a lot of evidence, specifically Mamenchosaurus itself, for existing over in China during the early Cretaceous period, like for over 20 million years.
You got another question. So I love Krishima says, "How old was the pterodactyl when it died back then?" I think
Well, you might be referring to Pteranodon, but I can mention both. Pterodactylus, which is the authentic or the actual genus name for pterodactyl existed much earlier into the Jurassic, over 160 million years ago in England. It was a very small pterosaur. I guess you could say it was somewhat average sized, but they could be slightly larger in the well, actually much larger in the Jurassic. It only had a wingspan of maybe 2 feet or pushing point 0.6 meters, and probably only weighed maybe a pound at most, or a little less than half a kilogram, and was likely feeding on different species of fish. It also had a series of conical teeth inside of its beak. What most people tend to think of when they hear the word pterodactyl is pteranodon, which is the large crested pterosaur from late Cretaceous North America about 80 to 83 million years ago. And pteranodon, it also tends to be reconstructed as coexisting with different species of hadrosaurs, different species of like medium-sized tyrannosaurs. It likely did coexist with certain species of early hadrosaurs, like some of the earliest members of the Hadrosauridae lineage. Probably not any species of medium-sized tyrannosaurs that existed later after it went extinct. Um, it's been found in certain areas of the northern United States, and I believe a certain region of southern Alberta when referring to Pteranodon. But Pteranodon did not have any teeth inside of its mouth. It was completely toothless and could probably have a wingspan of pushing 20 to 25 feet or somewhere between 6 to nearly 8 meters. Probably weighed in some instances of 120 to 140 pounds or pushing between 60 to 65 kilograms. But likely also fed on fish. It might have been a scavenger, could have possibly preyed on dinosaur hatchlings now and then. It would have been incredibly risky, considering like it was nimble on land compared to certain earlier, I guess maybe slightly more nimble compared to certain earlier forms of the pteranodontoids. But it's very distantly related to the pterodactylus of the Jurassic.
Okay, John Doe said the flaming cliffs in China have been a great place to find new dinosaurs, and now Africa is pulling out new species also.
Oh, yeah, the Flaming Cliffs. Oh, it was Roy Chapman Andrews, I believe, back in the 1910s and 1920s, who made the massive expeditions to the Gobi Desert that was finding a wide variety of different animals like Protoceratops, Velociraptor, maybe Shantungosaurus, but Shantungosaurus might have been later with another paleontologist. Um, yeah, in that area. Africa, it's been on and off. Different parts of South Africa, Tanzania, since the late 1800s, I believe, there have been a wide variety of excavations coming in from those regions, especially if you're looking at Triassic, Jurassic layers of different species of prosauropods, earlier Archosaur ancestors to the dinosaurs, also earlier Neotheropods, and I believe even certain sauropods and megalosaurids into the Jurassic like around the same time as this Chinese sauropod. You had different paleontologists from Germany, England, also the United States, um, making a wide variety of discoveries in those areas. In fact, I think you could possibly say it slowed down because there were a number coming in. But West Africa or even Central Africa, it's pretty much non-existent with different species of dinosaurs. In fact, almost any prehistoric animals coming in from those areas because I believe that they just were not a good region for fossils to be preserved. There might be certain fragmentary remains over in Western Sub-Saharan Africa. So I'm referring to areas of like Cote d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Cameroon, Angola. It's pretty unfortunate that we can't find anything over there. It's mostly East and Southern Sub-Saharan Africa, not including the Sahara Desert, which, like in different areas of, Morocco, Egypt, Niger. Niger is a huge place for like different species of early late Cretaceous dinosaurs, but also as you head further north, Cenozoic era, early Whales. Okay, however, Langwulong Shenkai shows that these Diplodocus-like sauropods were present after all, and implies that the isolation of East Asia was less profound and short-lived than we realized. So I think this was just showing evidence of the diplodocids, the diplodocid neosauropods in the middle Jurassic already occurring here. Well, it's still interesting considering, unless it was much more recent, which there have been, I think, like a couple of species of Mamenchosaurus in recent years from China, but I swear they were from the early Cretaceous, however. But why I'm mentioning that is that supposedly it existed as far back as literally the exact date of this animal, 174 million years ago.
I love Karmashima just said, right now my sister's watching a dinosaur video.
Um, well, I hope it's entertaining and somebody's getting eaten. Okay, well, guess let's head to another part of the Mesozoic. Okay, so from Sci News, iguana-sized reptile roamed Antarctica 250 million years ago. Well, this is not something that you hear of very often. Usually, if you're talking about Antarctica, still coming from the Triassic, but this is within the first 2 million years of the period, usually a bit later, and you hear about certain prosauropods, possibly even certain pseudosuchians in the area, and then neotheropods into the early Jurassic. This is shocking. But iguana-sized, that could vary. Some 250 million years ago, early Triassic epoch, an early relative of dinosaurs and crocodiles lived in what is now a frozen continent, Antarctica, according to an international team of paleontologists from the United States and South Africa. Actually makes sense that South Africa would be on here because of Pangea and what was occurring. That is definitely not what I was expecting, because it's not iguana-like. Like, iguanas have a very round, well, not necessarily round, but it's like a short, blunt sort of a skull. This is almost like the goanna of Australia. So,
Wait, are those supposed to be cynodons?
yeah,
Yeah.
Dicynodonts, it's a smaller species. I mean, when you're looking at different species of Dicynodonts from the Triassic, you have animals that could reach somewhere around 200 pounds or pushing. Well, actually, that's not true. If you're looking at the very early Triassic or late Permian, species that might have weighed 4 to 8 pounds or pushing between 2 to 3 kilograms, and then some weighing as much as an Asian elephant, or actually, no, in some cases more. I think maybe a bush elephant pushing between like 4 to 7 tons. Question is, who is that? Here's the problem. If this is 250 million years ago, this likely would not have been an ecosystem situation because neither the giant pseudosuchians and there were dicynodons, but they, like the giant um, relatives of Rausuchians, had not evolved. It's another lineage. It's mentioning. Oh, what is this thing? Supposedly, it's an Antarctinax skeletoni. Or no, wait, that's him. Okay, a Prolacerta bruma. I'm not familiar with this reptile. I'm guessing it's not an Archosaur. It's some other major reptile lineage. And yeah, it doesn't even give a name. So these are supposed to be Lystrosaurus. That would make sense. They survived the Permian extinction. This is a mysterious animal. Probably didn't evolve yet. Didn't evolve yet. The
John Doe said scientists are using tortoises to irrigate the Sahara Desert to bring back the forest because tortoises burrow. And didn't we just see something on this?
Yeah, we there was something going on. They had released a number of tortoises. Gosh, where was it? Senegal? In yeah, a certain massive area. And yeah, it was quite interesting. I actually found it a bit surprising that the tortoises were having their burrowing behavior had apparently a very beneficial impact on the sub-Saharan specific savannas of Western Africa. So that was interesting. There is only so much of the deserts that can be, however, I guess, reforested because the dirt, even though you can make extraordinary changes to the soil chemistry, there's only so much of an amount that can be changed also due to the overall climate, certain nutrients in the area
Yeah,
where
he's saying that they're using it to irrigate seeds that are dormant well below the ground.
yeah, it's likely true. African spurred tortoises are native to that part of Africa. In fact, I think it's most of Africa that they're indigenous to. So, yeah, I guess there's just not much that I can say about that. I haven't taken a deep dive into African spurred tortoise behavior, but they are very well known, especially in even different parts of the United States with escapees for burrowing extremely well. So the ancient, focusing on, what is it? This weird goanna. This ancient creature named Antarctanax shackletoni was a carnivore that hunted bugs, early mammal relatives, and amphibians. That's interesting. They make this thing look huge. Oh, wait. That's actually supposed to be a size representation.
Well, how
Shit.
large were the bugs at this point?
Not much larger than today's. It was back in the Carboniferous period, around 320 million years ago, where we had the different species of insects like the dragonfly Meganeura that could have a wingspan of somewhere between 2 to 3 feet, or pushing about what point 6 to nearly a meter, or 3.3 feet. And they were likely feeding on a wide range of smaller amphibians. I mean, there were certain amphibians back in the Carboniferous that could reach over 8 feet in length, or in some cases, maybe weighing 2 to 300 pounds, or pushing over 100 kilograms. And we're also probably preying on the dragonflies at certain points. The different large, immense species of centipedes, like the Arthroplura, which I believe over in Scotland we have had different footprint preservations of those animals. So we had like Arthroplura reaching somewhere around, I think 5 to 6 feet.
How big were dragonflies back then?
Um, yeah, about two to I. They probably I don't know about the weight, but still having a wingspan of 2 to 3 feet, or pushing around a meter. So its small, incomplete skeleton was collected from Graphite Peak in the Trans-Antarctic Mountains during a 2010 to 2011 expedition. It is interesting, like how all of a sudden these different fossils will show up in Antarctica. I mean, we have other different dinosaurs in the area too, like Krylophosaurus, but that's for not another 60 million years. The fossil specimen consists of portions of the backbone, limbs, and skull. Antarctanax shackletoni was an archosaur. Wait, it might have said it earlier, but it has a very lizard look and not like archosaurs. An early relative of crocodiles and dinosaurs, said lead author Dr. Brandon P. Cook, a paleontologist at Field Museum. On its own, it just looks like a lizard, but evolutionarily, it's one of the first members of that big group. It tells us how dinosaurs and their closest relatives evolved and spread. The most interesting thing about Antarctanax shackletoni, though, is where it lived and when. The more we find out about prehistoric Antarctica, the weirder it is. We thought that Antarctic animals would be similar to the ones that were living in southern Africa, since those land masses were joined back then. Probably talking about animals like Ephigia and possibly even Poposaurus. In fact, let's bring up these creatures, specifically Poposaurus. Poposaur.
I can't help it.
It is an Archosaur. This is not Paposaurus. This is possibly Arizonasaurus, which yes, was found in Arizona. Um, but it's an earlier Archosaur, likely a carnivore, but probably reaching somewhere around maybe 3 feet in length, depending on the species, or pushing around a meter. Okay, this is Paposaurus. It has a very theropod look, but it's not one. It was occurring also before any of the first true theropods were to exist. This is about 247 million years ago, back in the Triassic. So it's a little after this goanna like discovery. And I mean, when you look at this animal, it does have very even later theropod dinosaur traits. If you're looking at different species of even maybe it's like more slender tyrannosaurs to an extent, looking at that skull. But then you're looking at the tail, even the arms, not very theropod like. In fact, they actually resemble certain ornithopods in some instances, like the heterodontosaurs, pachycephalosaurs, which is interesting. It's got like a ornithischian, saurischian sort of a mix.
Somebody
And
drew one.
yeah, I mean it's not bad. They're definitely giving it a bit more of like a lizard sort of a look. And no, actually it's quite distantly related. I would say one of the interesting things about the poposaurs in general, or poposauridae. So this animal is related to Ephegia, the long-necked archosaur, but it has very short legs compared to its body length.
I can't spell that.
No, Ephegia, Efffigia.
Oh, okay, never mind.
There was another creature because we didn't bring him up too long ago. It was Euphrasia that I wanted to bring up. Oh, Efrasia. Yeah, that's him. So despite this animal, I don't know, hmm. Well, I mean, I guess it's okay, but I think his toes are a little too ornithopod-like. Um, Despite it looking like some species of ornithomimid from the Cretaceous period, this animal was not a dinosaur. It was a species of archosaur, but it's occurring before any of the first true dinosaurs would have evolved, which is probably between 235 to 237 million years ago. And in many cases, with those first dinosaurs, they weren't even theropods or prosauropods at that time. They were like basal saurischians. In fact, with some of them, it's still a bit debated as to whether or not it was saurischian, depending on the species. Now, the ornithischians, which would become like Triceratops, Pachycephalosaurus, would not evolve until the Jurassic. Oh gosh, I guess with a lot of these, it is very confused. You could say it was going to be a bit more bipedal, so I'd say the picture beforehand was more realistic. But sauropods won't evolve for probably another 40, 45 million. No, that's not true. Probably another 60 million years. Also, the prosauropods in general are probably. This is closer. Yeah. I mean, I guess it's just also a bit of a featherless sort of a look compared to the other depiction, but it's closer. It is interesting how prosauropod like this animal was. I'd say in some instances, I guess it was a bit more highly evolved compared to Ephegia, but Euphrasia is still, I think, reaching somewhere around 10 to 12 feet in length. So for the time, and in general with these species of archosaurs, it was like one of the larger medium sized species. And it does seem to be an herbivore. It is interesting with a lot of these different species of almost proto dinosaurs or just earlier predecessors, because with the feeding behavior, at least when you're looking at the jaw structure, the different species of earlier dinosaurs, like when you're looking at prosauropods or the earlier avitheropods, they're all pretty much carnivores. But for some reason, with the earlier proto dinosaurs, many of them are herbivores. Though you do have species like Paposaurus, which is a carnivore. In fact, most members of Poposauridae were carnivorous. So probably feeding on other species of Archosaurs at the time. It certainly is a powerful carnivore for the early Triassic, probably feeding on different species of dicynodonts like the Lystrosaurs, other members of Stylacaridae, which is what animals like Lystrosaurus, Lysowikia, Placerius, Stylacariae belong to. So mentioning all the tusked dicynodonts.
Is that a good Ophidia?
Um, it could represent him. They're definitely giving him quite wide arms, but yeah, I mean, I guess it's okay for a hatchling. It's very possible that their necks were likely shorter compared to their body size, unlike the adults. It's giving it that distinct beak. Ephigia is very well known for having a beak compared to many other species of Archosaurs at this point. So is this yeah, I get yeah, Ephigia also has much smaller arms compared to the Euphrasia species. Also possibly omnivorous.
Okay, I love Kirishima says, is there a reason why dinosaurs don't exist anymore?
Well, if you're technically they still exist. They're just the avian dinosaurs. They are members of the Paravest lineage, very closely related to the extinct now dromaeosaurs. They are avitheropods, or you could even say very small evolved neotheropods, the birds. And like we have over 10,000 species of avian dinosaurs today. Besides, like not including the non-avian dinosaurs that went extinct 66 million years ago, the birds have been around, or the bird theropod dinosaurs have been around for about 150 million years. So it seems to have first evolved over in late Jurassic Germany, during the late or the last, I'd say, 8 million years of the Jurassic. So also they were coexisting with different species of sauropods, allosaurs at that point, possibly even later megalosaurs, and some of the earliest ceratopsians too.
I think
So
the reason people have a hard time reconciling that in their heads is because of the crocodilomorph thing for so many years.
yeah,
They
yeah, that too. I mean, you could say that we still have pseudosuchian archosaurs among us. They're just not dinosaurs. They are close relatives. Um, like I believe we have around 20 different species of crocodilomorph or pseudosuchian around us today.
wait, are crocodile are
Crocodilians or crocodilomorphs.
yeah, are they hollow boned?
Technically, they're just more dense compared to certain other lineages of animals. It's kind of like mammals do have hollow bones. Also, it can vary depending on not just the overall lineage, but even the specific species and probably subspecies a little less so. It can still be a wide difference. But, you can because you can looking at different species of tyrannosaurs, and some have much more dense bones compared to others. Certain lineages of the tyrannosaurs, like, Nanukosaurus over in Alaska, that really didn't change much in bone density compared to its overall size. From a hatchling to an adult, they were very, lightweight, so or lightly built. Mm, yeah, so they're still here, just, small. Let's see.
That was funny. Small and all feathered. Well, mostly.
Yeah. Certain breeds of theropod dinosaurs today, are nearly, naked, like a certain parrot, kinda creepy. It needs the feathers. So, on its own, it just looks like a little like a lizard, but evolutionarily, it's one of the first members of that big group. It tells us how dinosaurs and their closest relatives evolved and spread. The most interesting thing about Antarctanax shackletoni, though, is where it lived and when. The more we found out about prehistoric Antarctica, the weirder it is. We thought that Antarctic animals would be similar to the ones that were living in. Oh, I already said this. About 2 million years ago, before Antarctanax shackletoni lived, lived, Earth underwent its biggest ever mass extinction event, the end Permian mass extinction. Climate change caused by volcanic eruptions killed 90% of all animal life. Yeah, I think it's because it put climate change first. Um, it's making out like the volcanic eruptions were having like the limited sort of a look or impact. It was the volcanic eruptions that were causing the immense issue. And it was still astounding as to how many animals were able to survive, as well as like plants, fungi, into the next stage, the Mesozoic era, because this was virtually the end of the Protozoic. So extending for or from 530 million years ago to about 252 million years ago, or the end of the Permian. The Permian started around 299 million years ago to about 252 million years ago.
Okay, I love Kirishima said, is a lizard a type of dinosaur?
No, they're very far off in the group. They actually evolved. They're basically old or earlier representatives of reptiliae. And that's not meaning that the dinosaurs were cold blooded. They were all warm blooded. The lizards seem to have evolved somewhere around 315 to 320 million years ago during the Carboniferous period. But might have been slightly later, however, but it's within the later stage of the Carboniferous that they seem to have occurred. Very small at the time, though. In some cases, smaller than certain species of geckos. So barely like this length of the palm of your hand. So I think one species it would be Petrolacosaurus. So barely maybe reaching somewhere around 3 inches, maybe slightly longer, or what would that be? Around like maybe 8 centimeters. The years immediately after that extinction event, though the dinosaurs would derive from those members of or certain members of reptilia. I'm not necessarily sure if it's been a bit more agreed upon as to whether or not it would be Petrolacosaurus. He might have had his lineage end at a certain point. Okay, so we're an evolutionary free for all with the slate wiped clean by the mass extinction. New groups of animals vied to fill the gaps. The archosaurs, including dinosaurs, were one of the groups that experienced enormous growth. Before the mass extinction, archosaurs were only found around the equator, but after it, they were everywhere. Um, hmm. We might need to take this with a grain of salt. Unless I'm mistaking it for proto mammals or other lineages of reptiles, because it's only mentioning archosaurs. I mean, it could be correct. And Antarctica had a combination of these brand new animals and stragglers of animals that were already extinct in most places. And paleontologists call dead clades walking. You've got tomorrow's animals and yesterday's animals cohabiting in a cool place. I think it's referring to like temperature wise cool. Okay, let's bring up another species of Dicynodonts, the Stellicariae.
It's kind of funny. Um, I love Kirishima says, okay, because one of my friends said that they were a type of dinosaur.
Now, lizards are very far off in the family tree. Completely also distinct. All lizards have hips pretty much splayed out to the side. It's a bit clunky in the way they walk, too. Dinosaurs would be very graceful. Even when looking at sauropods, very even with the flow. Okay. So Stahlerisckae. Nobody pop up.
I don't know. Spelled again?
Stahleeri.
Wait, wait. Leer? Two E's?
No, one.
Okay.
I. Nobody pop up.
No, I'm misspelling something.
Let's see. So Stih um Lacker. Yeah, IA.
Is it a synodont?
Yeah. Yeah, Dicynodonts and Cynodonts they're related groups, but they're still quite distant. The Dicynodonts are the tusked species of the late Permian and pretty much through the whole Triassic period. The Cynodonts were also existing during the late Permian, such as Cynognathus. Um, well, Cynognathus might have been very early Triassic, like 251 to 252 million years ago, the dawn of the era, and also persisted towards the end of the Triassic. You just had the true mammals, which would continue. So, Stylocaria is a member of the broader Stylocaridae lineage of Dicynodonts. Now, Stylocaria specifically has much shorter. In fact, its tusks are almost blunt compared to a wide variety of species, such as Lysowickiae, the Placerius itself, had very distinct tusk structures where it's almost like looking at a ceratopsian to certain species of ceratopsians with this dull sort of a look. Like
I
this.
think, I love Commissioners ask, "Why does the dinosaur look like that?" I think
Oh,
she thinks that's a dinosaur.
this is a very it's not closely related to dinosaurs, the archosaurs at all. In fact, Reptiliae, it's actually more closely related to people or the different species or lineages of mammals today, like bears, wolves, elephants. This animal is a proto-mammal. The Dicynodonts, all Dicynodonts were not true mammals, but they were descendants of likely, I believe, the synapsid lineage, which would link back to the Permian, like over 285 million years ago. And the Dicynodonts in general seem to have been a um, what was it? Oh, mostly herbivorous, so it's feeding on different species of plants. Also, like certain types of dinosaurs, however, they did not contain teeth, but you also have different species of reptiles in general. I don't know of other proto mammals that didn't contain any teeth, though technically tusks are teeth, but I'm referring to inside the mouth where there would have um, been slight chewing with different lineages. They didn't have teeth in those areas. So technically, like elephant tusks, mammoth tusks, those are teeth. They're just not used for chewing. Let's see. I believe with Salicaria, this animal would range between like 1,000 to 1,200 pounds, or pushing between like 550 kilograms, and existed also a bit earlier on into the Triassic. I think this was somewhere around 240 to 245 million years ago, possibly in South Africa. So we do find a number of Dicynodonts, not just the little Lectrosaurs, which in some cases were not much more than maybe 30 to 40 pounds. Some would become a bit larger, but maybe pushing around 15 to 20 kilograms. You had a wide variety of species that were also within like the 150 to 300 pound realm, or between like 70 to maybe 140 kilograms. It also is interesting, like certain species of ceratopsian dinosaurs, it has quite a bit of armor on its head. It also is a bit of a debate as to whether or not these animals might have rammed heads or headbutted each other during the breeding season, like bighorn sheep or Cape buffalo bison do today. Or you could even compare it to like the Pachyrhinosaur or ceratopsians back in the or further into the late Cretaceous. That's far after these animals would have gone extinct. They did have short tails compared to their body size. I do want to correct my statement on them being synapsids. I think it's very possible these are therapsids, so a different lineage of animals, a bit slightly distantly related to the synapsids. So synapsids, like some of the earlier representations, would have been carnivores such as Dimetrodon. So with the elongated sail on its back, also not closely related to later elongated sail species like the different species of long necked sauropods and spinosaurs. Somebody else, probably like Parsipodia. There are even guanodontids. Oh, let's just head back. Okay, so back onto this goanna-like reptile. Though it's an archosaur, goannas are not. The discovery of Antarctanax shackletoni bolsters the idea that Antarctica was a place of rapid evolution and diversification after the end Permian mass extinction. The more different kinds of animals we find, the more we learn about the pattern of archosaurs taking over after the mass extinction. Antarctica is one of those places on Earth, like the bottom of the sea, where we're still in the very early stages of exploration. And Arctanax shackletoni is our little part of discovering the history of Antarctica. Fossil exploration in Antarctica is really difficult given all of the logistics involved. But since so little work has been done, the potential for making important new discoveries is high. And that's what Antarctanax shackletoni represents, said senior author Professor Christian Sider, a researcher at the University of Washington and curator of vertebrate paleontology at the Burke Museum of Natural History and Culture. The same rocks that yielded Antarctic shackletoni also yield some of the earliest mammal relatives from after the mass extinction. You might be referring to, I think, yeah, there have been dicynodonts that have been discovered in Antarctica. Okay, well, I still think a bit of a mystery with this archosaur. Okay, well, we're going to give everybody a minute to put any other comments into the chat.
Okay, Crystal asks, are there any other dinosaurs? There any other animals today that are related to dinosaurs? I assume that she's asking other than birds.
Well, I mean, the crocodilians and only specifically those reptiles are close relatives of the dinosaurs, not including modern day birds. Outside of that, the other reptiles are very far off in the family tree. They took an entire. Well, I'd say that the reptiles that would become the archosaurs or the dinosaurs, the pterosaurs, also the sauropodian marine reptiles like the plesiosaurs, the pliosaurs. So okay, just completely different branch and are very far off from any like crocodile monitors, iguanas, even though like back in the 1900s, well, 1800s really is like you had different species of dinosaurs like Megalosaurus, Iguanodon being represented as like very enhanced, bulky lizards at the time, and even like different marine reptiles and pterosaurs. But pretty much outside of the crocodilians, and not including the birds, there isn't anything else. Um,
Oh, wait a minute. I forget. What did everything evolve from?
well, if you're looking at all modern day mammals, amphibians, reptiles, and birds, they derive from Tiktaalik, very
No, no,
likely.
I don't mean that. I meant,
Oh, like a small fish.
no, no. Like, what did dinosaurs actually evolve from?
The specific animal, there was a species of archosaur from the early Triassic between 247 250 million years ago called Euparkeria. And it is like somewhere around 2.5 to maybe 3.5 feet in length or pushing just a little over a meter. Very lightweight, however, but it shows major connections and changes to the overall locomotion of carnivorous, I could say, reptiles and even archosaurs for the time. It like the ability to walk on two legs, which was pretty much non-existent for most animals, possibly even any at that point. It was also possibly slightly quadrupedal as well, so also walking on all fours.
Okay, she asked something else. Is the elephant related to the woolly mammoth? I mean, sure, it's not about dinosaurs, but just curious. Well, you do what type of
Yeah, we do cover Cenozoic mammals too. So for age mammals, Pleistocene or Ice Age. Woolly mammoths are related to modern day elephants, but they're more closely related to the Asian elephant, Elephas maximus, than they are to Loxodonta africanus, which is the bush elephant, or even the African forest elephant. Um, there were around 10 different species of mammoths that we have discovered so far, and that is including the dwarf mammoths or the little midgets running around on different islands off of the coast of Alaska, California, Italy, like Sardinia, islands off the coast of Greece, also Cyprus Island, so a little more adjacent to Turkey. I'm trying to think. There might have been another region, like maybe off the Pacific. Oh yeah, Wrangel Island. With those, that would have been just another small woolly mammoth population. But they are more closely related to Asian elephants. Um, It also, however, when you look at like how these animals would have fed, also like the dental structure, it's a bit different with mammoths and all species being primarily grazers. There were certain species of proboscideans or members of the elephant family earlier on that probably had a mixed diet, but they're still very distantly related to any of the elephants of today. So, especially like when referring to the gomphotheres or mastodons were leaf specialists, however.
I'm betting she doesn't know what a gomphothere is.
Okay, yeah, more like the four-tusked species of proboscideans. So it's like dating back in some cases over 15 million years, 20 million years, depending on the proboscidean. Four-tusked individuals. Oh yeah, they're back. So these animals have been found over in different parts of Africa and Asia.
Well, what is it?
This is possibly a Gomphotherium. There's also the Stegodon, which Um, does somewhat represent, or it looks similar to like the longer tusked individual, especially the one on the far right in this picture. It's a huge debate though as to what specifically they would have used these tusks for. Maybe for scooping up different aquatic plants, maybe shoveling certain bark off of trees, considering practically all elephants today will feed on bark occasionally, usually like during drier seasons, during the dry season in general. Um, also feeding on different species of fruit, but just the tusks. I mean, obviously they could have been used for defense. There have been certain theories as to maybe even carrying their young on their tusks, but that's really with the shovel tusked creatures such as the Platyblodon or the Ambelodon. Not really a sort of mechanism. This is the creature I'm referring to. Not really a mechanism the animals like Stegodon would have used.
But it's still a gomphothere? Says it is.
It's yeah, it's I was just thinking of like Stegodon and Gomphotherium itself. It is a member of the lineage. They're a bit more closely related to the mastodons than they are the mammoths, however. And in many cases, I think we have found Platyblodon over in Tanzania, so somewhere around 8 to 12 million years ago. A certain species slightly later. They're a bit closer to the Ice Age. It's one of those species. Maybe is this Ambelodon? Because it's not the doesn't have those distinct shovel tusks. Also, their trunks tend to be reconstructed as being longer compared to their body size today, but still not a bad painting. I think it's from what 1980s, maybe. Actually, it could be older.
Wait, what did you say you thought it was?
An embellodon.
It says Augustidinus?
Oh, Augustodinus.
Yep.
Yeah, it's specific species. I'll need to review him. So he's likely just another member of the Gomphothere lineage.
Hold on, give her a second. I think she wanted something else. But okay. Who is the Asian elephant who is the Asian elephant that is related to the woolly mammoth? Does that mean that the woolly mammoth still exists?
You can have a like a very closely related species. Well, you can have a species that's closely related to another, but it's very distinct in overall genetics, appearance. I'd say, I mean, when looking at like the hairs of a baby Asian elephant, you could say in some instances, especially if it's born to a cooler climate, it almost appears to be like a young woolly mammoth that has been recovered, considering like it's covered in a wide range of orange furs, which is very likely for or similar to certain woolly mammoth babies that have been discovered, at least from the permafrost, and they were barely a month old. But they're still Asian elephants are still very different from woolly mammoths. They also feed on very distinct plants that were non-existent on the ecosystems that the woolly mammoths inhabited. Woolly mammoths inhabited a treeless mammoth steppe landscape. It was like a somewhat semi-arid grassland to an extent. It was much drier than really any of the habitats that Asian elephants inhabit today, despite Asian elephants going through dry seasons. They live in many instances forested landscapes, or there might be certain seasonal floodland grasslands, like over in northern India, but they're adjacent to forests. Woolly mammoths tend to avoid forested areas until they would head further south during certain glacial events, like over in different parts of Canada, and they would hit like New England over the northeastern United States. So, like adjacent to Maine, New Hampshire, New York, certain parts of the Midwest, like Minnesota and Wisconsin. But, yeah, they're also just feeding really on grasses that are very high in nutrients and minerals compared to different species of grasses today. Like even over in different parts of sub-Saharan Africa with different elephant herds, they're in some instances feeding on vegetation that's not as high in different nutrients. Like because in order to obtain the fat that the woolly mammoths would have contained, they would have needed specific types of minerals and nutrients to put on like 30% fat on their bodies, whereas elephants barely accumulate any fat because they don't need it. It would simply create too much insulation and also cause it or make it harder for heat to dissipate or exit their bodies. And usually it's just simply having to obtain like little bits of food here and there during the dry season. Let's see, what was another thing? Oh, okay. So we were going on like, does that mean that it's around today? No, it seems that the last woolly mammoths went extinct over in the islands of Alaska, like especially St. Paul's Island, about 3,400 years ago during the Bronze Age. And they were dwarfs back then. In some cases, probably not much larger than a horse in some instances, though we had certain populations of mammoths. This is probably the Cypress mammoth that I'm thinking of. However, that was also probably around somewhere between 3,500 to 4,000 years ago. Maybe 100 pounds, 50 to 100 pounds, very small.
I didn't know that one.
Yeah, probably between 22 to maybe 45 kilograms. Okay, so thanks for joining. And for Prehistoric to Present, my name is Ethan. This is Creature Guy Live Daily News. We're streaming on both Rumble, YouTube, and Kick. And remember that nothing is better than all animals all the time.